Hello everybody, or should I be saying annyeonghaseyo, because today we're talking about DNF Duel, the next big anime fighter that everybody's going to be playing for about 2 days and then stop. Not because the game is shitty, but because that's just usually the way it goes. And it's really sad because I don't think this game seems shitty at all. I'm honestly kind of excited about it, which is why I wanted to give you my impressions now that the second beta has concluded. And I'm going to be showing some of my own matches here in the background. These are some of the first matches I ever played in this game, and you can sort of tell by the level of the gameplay, but I'm the Blue Inquisitor right here, and then I play some Vanguard later. Now the first big problem with this beta, and it is a big problem, is that it didn't include any kind of practice mode. The only thing you could do was go into lobbies and then play matches. It's a problem for a couple of reasons. First of all, I think what people want to do when they try a new fighting game is find a character that looks cool to them, learn their mechanics and then a couple of combos, and then go online and start having fun, right? Which you can't really do if somebody's pummeling you in the face all the time. It's not exactly conducive to learning, I guess, unless you're taking boxing lessons. But it's also a big problem because, like I said, these fighting games, many of them tend to fizzle out quite quickly. So what you really want to do is showcase what sets your fighting game apart mechanically. What does DNF Duel really do? So you want people to be able to explore that in practice mode, right? And you want to get the content creators going, explaining it to people and making videos about how DNF Duel is unique and interesting. I'm struggling right now to see how this game is going to be able to compete. I want to play it and I want it to do really well, but for example, why should you play this over, for example, Guilty Gear Strive, which is from the same developers, looks very similar, mechanically is kind of similar, and already has an established legacy and an established player base, and an entire new season of content coming out with legacy characters that are already famous, right? But I'm going to try and explain in this video why I think this game is so cool and why I want to play it, and sort of, you know, the basics of how it works mechanically, and then I want to talk a bit about the roster as well. So I think one of the unique and really interesting things about DNF Duel is that it is extremely simple. It's not difficult at all to pick up and understand. When I started playing Guilty Gear Strive for the first time, it really was a bit overwhelming, and then after, you know, a week or so of really doing a lot of exploring in practice mode and trying characters, it's sort of started to make sense and I could start to really play. But it was very daunting, and I've heard that that is even supposed to be a very simplified version of Guilty Gear. So some of these anime fighters, they have, you know, a lot of legacy mechanics, and they're really quite advanced, and you have to do some difficult stuff and know a lot of stuff to be able to compete. But I think with DNF Duel, I think you can understand the basics of it really quite quickly and start playing. I've heard that Arc Systems did something similar with Dragon Ball FighterZ, which I haven't tried, but maybe that's sort of a thing that they're trying to establish, you know, fighting games that anybody could sort of have fun with. Now, I don't think that means that DNF Duel is going to be uninteresting, you know, that it lacks depth, but it's kind of like playing a low execution character in Tekken. You know, you're playing Miguel or a character like that. You don't have to do really advanced things with your fingers for the game to be deep and interesting, because you know, movement in that game is very deep. Decision making and mix-ups is very, very deep, right? So I think it can still be fun, just the learning process isn't going to take that long for most people, as far as I can tell. So in DNF Duel, you have 4 basic attack buttons, and I'm going to refer to them as 1, 2, 3, and 4 because I'm a Tekken player. But the 1 button is sort of your basic jab, so you can do a little 1-2 with that usually. It's when you want to get a quick hit in, and that can cancel into specials, so it's kind of typical for a 2D fighter in that way. Then you have your 2 button, which is sort of more of a powerful version of your 1 button. So your more sort of powerful normals, and then you have 2 different kinds of specials allocated to 2 different buttons. So the 4 button is your normal specials, so things like, you know, a DP maybe or a Tansu that you can do and cancel into normally. And then the 3 button is the really fun one. That is your mana or MP consuming specials. So specials that will consume your blue mana points or your mana gauge, and they will do sort of slightly more magical and powerful things, right? So that's the basics of how it works, and then you have a throw button. You can allocate that. It's allocated by default to R1 on pad, but you can do it by pressing, 2 attack buttons at the same time. And then with the specials, you can they vary depending on how you perform them. So you can do forward in your special button, or a DP input and your special button, or a quarter circle back, and things like that. And you get different versions of those specials that have different ranges and do different things. So you have a bunch of different attacks, but I think you will be quite familiar with the move list of your favorite character really quite quickly. And then it's about, geometry and placing those specials in proper ways and creating combos. So it's a pretty basic system, but it is really fun. I want to talk about the roster as well. I think this is honestly probably the best base roster I've seen for a new fighting game in a very long time. And it's not finished yet. It's going to get quite a bit bigger before the release happens, as far as I know. But it already has a bunch of really interesting and cool characters. So I was worrying a bit about, these characters kind of lacking personality and charm, because they're not characters, they're character classes from an RPG, right? So you have the Inquisitor, the Grappler, and so on. They don't even have names, but I think that they are all very unique and cool feeling. They have a bunch of personality, and more importantly, they seem to function in interesting and different ways. So I think it's going to be kind of like Soul Calibur with this one, where you don't really pick the character that looks the most awesome to you. It's more about picking the play style that works for you, because the characters are very different. Now, you know me, or if you do know me, if you follow my content, you know that I'm super into like European folklore, and I love vampires and witches and werewolves and stuff like that. So the Inquisitor is sort of right up my alley, and it's the character that I gravitated towards, because she can break people on the wheel, she can crucify people. I just think it's an awesome concept. But her unique mechanic, as an example, is she has a big axe, so she has long range on her normals, but she can also debuff the opponent and control space using her little bombs or item throws. So she can throw oil, or I guess holy water, and that debuffs the opponent. And then if you hit them with one of your MP attacks, those are flaming. So if the opponent is covered in oil and you hit them with a flaming attack, they start burning and it does more damage. And you can also place those sort of Molotov cocktails on the ground and deny space that way. So one really cool thing you can do with her is you do a couple of normals, and then you can cancel into a damaging special move to deal more damage, or you sort of backtrack and throw a Molotov, and if the opponent is jumping in, you can make them land in the fire, and that sets them up for a combo. Kind of like PK Fire from NES and Smash Brothers. If you play that, it functions kind of similar to that. And then you have the Vanguard, who I also think is pretty cool, and he's just a big guy with a really big stick, but he's kind of like a half zoner. He has such good range on all of his moves that he can kind of fight normally, but from half screen. So he's kind of like a Gigas sort of a character. Basic but big damage combos, really big damage and huge sort of comeback potential. But another one that I think is really awesome is the Grappler, actually. So you have all these fantastical characters, and then the Grappler is just a guy in his karate pajamas, like doing judo. But it's one of the coolest takes on a grappler I've seen in a while as well, because it's not one of those Potemkin Zangief kind of grapplers where he's just a huge tank who's walking really slowly, dodging projectiles, trying to get in, and then he does a throw that does like half-life. It's more like he has these fast normals, and then he cancels into his throws. So he kind of does a grappling attack instead of a DP. But he also has this reversal, kind of like Oscar in Tekken, where if he times it, he can grab the opponent's attack and turn that into a throw. So, for example, you already have pretty interesting matchups, right? Because the Vanguard has this giant spear, and he can keep the grappler out, and he can hit him from like, half screen or full screen with these giant spear swipes. But the grappler can just catch the spear and pull him in and turn that into a grappling situation. You've got the Dragon Knight, who has a pet that she can use to do area denial. The Ghostblade is the new character right here, and he's kind of like a puppet kind of a character. He can attack with two characters at the same time and teleport and stuff. Seems like he's going to be really interesting and advanced. So just a couple of examples, but you have a bunch of different playstyles here. And like I said, the characters all feel interesting and unique and have a lot of personality to me. So This roster so far is really awesome, and finding sort of your way of playing this game I think is going to be a lot of fun for a lot of people. So mechanically it's simple and easy to pick up. The characters are really cool. Let's talk a little bit about presentation. This looks like an Arxis fighter. It's got that anime style. I think it animates a bit more smoothly than, for example, Strive. It doesn't have that sort of low frame rate kind of a vibe to it. I think it looks really great. It's nothing, you know, extreme, but it does look pretty good, and I think it's, you know, it's good enough graphically to be a cool game to look at. And then I think the music, we don't have that many tracks in it yet, but some of them are kind of almost hauntingly beautiful. There's one that I think is from the like Sky Temple stage that I would be happy to listen to even when I'm not playing the game, and that's not something I can say about Guilty Gear Strive. One of my biggest criticisms of that game was that I couldn't have in-game music on in practice mode because the tracks were sort of, you know, teen rocky and a little bit awkward, but they also had lyrics constantly, which meant that they weren't loopable, and you just heard these awkwardly pronounced English words over and over and over, and it got very grating to me. But this music doesn't have lyrics. It's, you know, rocky and stuff. It's very anime, but it is much more loopable and nice to listen to. So I can see myself spending a couple of hours in practice mode and not growing annoyed with this game, which is really cool. So my impressions of this game for now are very positive. I'm super excited to see what other classes from this RPG they are going to loop in as playable characters. It's going to release pretty soon, so I mean, I hope the hype train keeps going. The most impressive thing leading up to this release really is what they have been doing with it. The way they communicate and roll out trailers and talk to the fans, it's sort of almost the opposite of what's been happening with Namco during Tekken 7. They seem to be much more willing to work with their community to create a cool game, which I think is you know, definitely the way to do it, and makes me feel more positive about, you know, really sinking into this game and spending time and effort on learning it and getting good at it. So once this comes out, I will be playing it probably for a while alongside Tekken. You know, maybe for the long term, we'll see what happens. But I just hope that DNF Duel really gets its chance to shine and establish a community, and that it becomes, you know, something a little bit long term for fighting games, and it doesn't become one of these other, you know, melty boobies, or, you know, grand, you know, big blue meanie, or whatever they're called. All these anime fighters that look really cool, have a lot of unique ideas, but then, you know, you forget about them after a week, sort of a thing. If you haven't tried DNF Duel, if you haven't gotten into watching trailers and picking, you know, your favorite character that you want to main, and so on, I definitely recommend that you do, because there's some really cool ideas in here, and it is a lot of fun to play. You know, hit detection is good. It feels, you know, satisfying to fight and win in this game. So it's definitely worth a shot. Thank you so much for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you tried DNF Duel, and I'll see you guys very soon.